Here is our spaceship render from Maya, and when you see it in motion, you can start to feel the size of the ship. And let's go ahead and use the same technique as the rocks and composite on top of our background. The script is the same. I've renamed the portions that I've done, the matte painting, the keying, the rock comp that was merged here. I haven't used the defocus here because I think it was not required. And here's a ship render. I'll use the auto comp to lay it out. We have all our passes here. Like I said, I won't be using the beauty, the position, and the I'll use motion vectors but no normals. And let's shuffle the nodes so that we can work better. And I won't be using the depth for defocus, but I'll be using I might use the depth for color grading, but since we have our puzzle mat, I think that's not required, but let's just keep it just in case. And the same thing like before, I'll remove these nodes and remove Ziebler, drop an unpremult node, and the premult node that goes into our background, I mean the foreground. And if you have a look, same thing like before, we don't have alpha here, so right after the Z depth copy depth pass, I'll drop a dot node and drop a copy node, bring the alpha from our main render like that. For the sake of speed, I'll disable the rock and the foreground. Let's just work with the background. And I'll also disable the defocus in the background because we have to match the levels. So first node will be the grade node. We'll rename it levels match, and we'll do the same technique like the rocks, where we grab the blacks and the whites from the background and use the lift from the background to level it. So first let's balance the spaceship. Let's take the black point and look for the darkest portion of the image. And holding Control Shift Alt, I'll take a sample from over here. I'll do the same for the whites, the brightest part of our ship. I think I've sampled the wrong area, so let's redo that. I don't want to sample from the blown out area. Maybe this ship is fine because it has more of the background color of the light. So I'll sample that area. so, and we'll use the lift from the background. Control Shift Alt, not Alt, Control Shift. And the same way we'll do that for the gain. And if we increase the gain, you'll see the background and the foreground ship is blending together. The blacks are matching. And then let's play with the offset. Before that, I'll just go to my gain and try to match the midtones. It doesn't have to be perfect because we'll be doing a general color correction on the whole footage. Let's play with the gamma. Most of the time you have to eyeball it because there's no shortcut to matching everything automatically. But whatever pleases your eyes, you should go for that. And that's before, this is after. There's a little too much atmospheric going on, so I'll drop down the multiply, the gamma, like so. And let's drop down a color correct node. I'll remove the saturation a bit. We can always add a saturation later on, but by playing with low saturation, it's much more easier to visualize the composite. And let's go ahead and see along with our rocks. And I have the operation going wrong way because the rocks will be in the foreground, so we'll have to merge the ship before the rocks. And now that's correct. Yeah, I think the ship is sitting pretty well. And one more thing before I go forward, I'll do a 2D relighting on the top portion of the ship, because since they are high in the sky, I think they should be a bit more washed out. So I'll drop a grade node. This will be, we'll rename it to top lighting, and let's drop a rotor node. It's more like a skylight. And add a blur. We'll do a huge blur, that's 250, and use that as a mask for our grade. So now if we increase the gamma, so that's giving sort of atmospheric going on top of the ship. So let's put it to 1.7 or 6, and then we can go down to the mix value and play with the blending. So let's say 0.5 is fine. There are many techniques to match colors, but in the end it always comes down to your eyes, what pleases you. So for me it works. It might be wrong or right, but it works for me. So and then I'll have to, because the ship and the background is much more further, I'll disable my rocks for now. Yeah, so because my the second ship is much further in the background, I think it should be a little bit more washed out. So what I can do is now I can use my puzzle mat. Let's drop a dot node. I'll isolate the back ship and grade it differently. So I'll drop a shuffle node. So if you preview that, we have our puzzle mat. But I want to use the green channel for a ship. So in the shuffle node, I'll select the green. So that's our alpha. Let's use a postage stamp so we know what's coming in. And then I'll drop a grade node. We'll use this as the mask. And then I'll go and play with the offset. So that's like so this gives it a bit more depth to the ship since it's further in the background. The background ship and the foreground ship, they are in a different depth, so it's good to have a different depth value for the background ship. So let's say that's fine, and then I'll go ahead and animate that. So let's set a key here, and since we know since our defocus starts from frame 50, I'll go ahead and put in a value of 0.05, I think, yeah. And then towards the end of the animation of our defocus, when since it's much more closer now, I'll decrease the value now. like so. And now we have a bit of a fake depth, so I can go ahead and preview that. And I think that gray node is working fine towards the atmospheric, especially right there. See how it's more washed out, and when it comes near to the camera, it's a bit more contrasty. And now let's go ahead and add our defocus. For the defocus, since I won't be using any, I won't be using the depth pass. I'll use the matte for controlling my defocus, because I think it gives you much more control instead of using the CG depth pass. So I go back to the frame 50 where all the defocusing starts. I'll put in a value of 20. Now you see the defocus node creates this sort of a hard edge defocusing because we are using the alpha, because we are using the mask. So it's defocusing it according to the mask, yeah, like that. So in order to extend our defocus, I'll have to put in an, I think I'll show it this way. So that's our mask. I'll go ahead and add an erode filter, so that way when we decrease the size, or if I can see the alpha, yeah, right there. So when we increase the size of the erode, it gives the defocus node more area to work, and that's why. So when I plug that in and look at the blur now, so that's without the erode and that's with the erode. And let's get full precision, or maybe bump up the quality. And I'm doing it wrong again because I have the pre-mult after the defocus is giving us this black edge. So I'll have to put the defocus after the pre-mult because we want to defocus the whole image, not just the alpha. So now that gives us the right result. There's no black edge going on. The defocus, I'll put in a value of 20 because it's much more further from the camera. And then I'll set a key on the frame 50. And by the time it reaches here, that's 150. I'll put in a value of 3 maybe. Should be fine. We can to check, I think we'll have to play blast that, but for now let's continue with the the first ship. So I'll go ahead and drop another defocus. I will rename defocus second ship, defocus first. And the same way, I'll drop another dot node, create a shuffle, and then this time we'll use the red channel as the alpha, and we'll use the mask. But before the mask, we have to put in an erode to extend our range for defocus. So -50. And then let's go ahead and increase the, for some reason my background's defocus. Okay, I'll have to activate that. So frame 50, it's, let's say 17. Let's set a key, and frame 150, put it down to 1.2. It's not completely in focus, but there's still some defocusing going on, but just a slight bit, because without the defocus, the details are very sharp and looks very CG. And now let's have a look at everything in it. Let's save our comp. Ship. And if you have the preview, the defocusing is I think matching with the rock and the character. It's in no way perfectly comped in, because that takes quite some time. But for me, I think the ship is a little bit too blue. So now, just like in production, I'll go ahead and add a master grade. That's in the end of the pipeline. I'll drop a color correct node. We'll call this master color correction, and then this will be the master, but all the grading that we are doing per pass basis, it's we can control it in much more precisely, because this node will act as our the output color space, or the color look that we're going for. So in the master grade, let's increase the contrast, and then let's play with some of the settings for the gamma. From this point on, it's all about getting your own creative look. And looking at the master grade, I think my character is a little too red. So I'll go ahead and go to my gain, and I'll just do it from here. Let's set it to let's try to match her color. It's green, so she's a little bit more blue, and just light blue, so that she sits in the scene. So that's a default look, and that's with a color. And now I'll go ahead and do another 2D lighting, putting a grade node. This will sort of fake the sunlight. I'll go ahead and drop a roto node that will use as mask and make a rectangle, so that a little bit of orange lighting is coming from the right side of the scene. There are many things you can do with a comp or shot. If you have control over the shot color, obviously in production they'll give you a color profile, and you'll have to match according to that. Let's go ahead and make it a bit orangey. And we play with the mask. And lastly, we can go ahead and play with the mix for blending. And I'm using a film convert, if you don't know that. For any indie filmmakers, film convert is a very good tool to have, although it's for color grading shots or your footage to make it a film look, but it also helps your CG renders to get the colors a bit more realistic. So I'll load in film convert right at the end. I'll use the FJ well preset. I'll reduce the green to 50%. You can play with the settings with all these film color, film curve. Right now what I'm doing is I'm doing an overall grade, but later on I'll go ahead and do maybe a bit more specific corrections. So that's without film convert. This is with the film convert. So it takes your colors into a bit more filmic color space. So that's our raw render, or the raw comp, and if you apply the film convert, it takes the color space into a bit more filmic look, and it also gives us the grain that we all love. So that'll be the end of the pipe, and this. And one last thing, not the last thing, one more thing. I want to add chromatic aberration on the outer edges of the shot, because most of the LEDs, they have a chromatic aberration. So for that I'll use a transform mask. And channels RGB. So now if you play with the scale, if I zoom in and play with the scale, okay. Alright, yeah, so I have to deselect either of these colors, so that gives us the chromatic aberration given by the lens. I really like the green and the blue combination, so I'll go back to scale and decrease it. So now if we, let's see, these effects are really tiny details, but it helps you sell your shot. So I did a bit more extreme there. So I'd say that's good enough, but I don't want the effect to be on all of the area. So I'll do another rotor node. We'll use that as mask and draw a ellipse. If you have a look at our alpha, we'll have to invert that because we want it to be on the edges. We invert that and put a blur. And we'll use that as the mask. So now we have our chromatic aberration going on the edges of the lens, not on the whole shot. So if we'll have a look, you see it's happening only around the edges. So that's good enough. And one last thing for this lesson, I've gone ahead and shot a footage in my home. That's the simple because I want to add a bit of camera shake. You can go ahead and use the camera shake node, but I feel it's too. I mean, of course you can go ahead and play with the settings and give you a realistic result, but there's nothing as real as shooting your own footage and use the motion from that. So if you look at the footage, it's a simple handheld shot on the 2 points. And I'll use this motion of the actual shot and apply that as the camera shake for footage. So I'll go ahead and drop a tracker node and add a track. I'll track it. And you have to make sure when you track, when you do these kind of template, that the points are a bit far away, because then it gives you a much more good motion instead of the points being too nearby, because we're going to average the effect of these 2 trackers and give us a new tracker. And I'll go ahead and create another track. So now we have 2 tracks. I want to use the translation, rotation, and scale. And I'll create an average track. For which I want translation, rotation, and scale. And I'll get rid of these 2 tracks. And go to my export and go and get transform match move baked. So this gives us a transform node that has all the animation. And I forgot to track the scale and rotation of the tracker, so I'll go ahead and do it again. For some reason you have to track it along all the values together. Okay. And then again I forgot to activate the rotation and scale. These guys, they keep getting shut off for some reason. And another tracker. So now we select these two and go average tracks, and let's delete these. We want the translation, rotation and scale. With that selected, we'll go to transform match move baked create. So now we'll use this transform node as our camera shake. Let's put that right below film convert. And now if you preview, you'll see that there is some sort of camera shake going on. So I'll do a quick preview. And that's with the camera shake. I think that gives it a bit more natural camera motion instead of a static cam. And obviously I could have done a camera shake for the background layer differently than the foreground by offsetting the animation, but for such a close-up shot I think it's working pretty fine. And one more last thing before I end this class is I can also add a lens distortion. Let's disable film convert, and we can add a lens distortion. Go to if I look for it, distort. Now I haven't used this for some time, but you can add a lens distortion to your clip to increase the realism. Okay, I think they might have changed the lens distortion node, because I can't find. Well, never mind, that was just an added layer of effect. I guess I'll get rid of that. So, and then there's again the specular and reflection. You can always go ahead and grade those layers, but for me I think just overlaying, adding the passes and just color correcting them according as it's working for me. And lastly, I want to no, maybe I don't. Yeah, so I'll hit a preview, a render preview, I mean frame cycle, and then have a look at the final effect, and then we can decide what's more to be done. So that's a preview. Looking at it, I'll have to scale the footage or the comp, because there's a bit of distortion going on over here because that there is no data over here. So we'll have to scale the final shot by a bit so that the camera shake has more data to work with. But overall, I think the shot is pretty fine, and the general feeling of the shot is coming along, except for these small technical stuff. But the defocusing, the grading, is all working fine. And looking at it, I think in the next class we'll build up on top of this comp, adding a tiny bit more stuff like lightning in the clouds, and matching her skin tone a little bit more, because right now she's a bit off the shot. Her hands are too saturated. So let's do that in the next class.